Hi, guys. Welcome to another of our It's Cool to Care series. We're super excited to have two guests with us today. The first is Kate from the People Project, which is a platform that gives a voice to people experiencing homelessness by sharing their stories. And we also have Hugo, the founder of Carden Banfield Foundation, which is a charity that's responding to homelessness by helping prevent people from becoming homeless in the first place, as well as giving support to those already experiencing homelessness and helping them prevent from reaching a further stage of crisis. So thank you both of you guys for joining us today. We're super excited to have you. So let's kick off and start with Kate. So Kate, can you tell us a little bit about how and why you started the People Project and the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, so I'm 21 now, and I started the People Project when I was 17, just as a naive 17-year-old. You think about school, you don't really think about the world outside of you. And it basically just started one day when me and a friend were walking around Shoreditch taking pictures of graffiti, just hanging out. And he suggested, oh, like, we saw a homeless person, and he said, like, oh, why don't we go up and speak to him and ask him for his picture? And I think my initial reaction was just like, no, why would we do that? Like, you don't speak to homeless people, like, not even meaning ill from that, but just that's such an instant assumption in your head, like that's just not something you do. And I think he was like, oh, come on, let's do it. And I was like, okay, like it, and we did it, and we spoke to him, and we got the photo and sat down and spoke to him. And I think another few people came up to us, and it was just a really interesting conversation because like I said, had never spoken to someone homeless. And I think it just really made me think, because I think especially at 17, you already don't relate to adults, and it just shows, I think, being able to just sit down and speak to anyone, you can connect on some sort of level. Me now, even, I am not able to speak. You wouldn't think that like someone young woman would be able to relate to like an old man, typical kind of homeless person that I would meet. But there is a connection you can make there. And I think just realizing that made me think, I like want to share this experience and share with people like what can actually happen if you do just start a conversation and realize how much that means to people. Because like I said, I just thought, oh, why would you do that? But when we spoke to him, and when I speak to people now, they just say how much they really appreciate people just stopping and talking to them. So I think that's what started the project, was just one, helping to spread stories, and two, just trying to inspire people to actually stop and speak to someone. If they see them, just say hello, wave, because that just makes you feel more human and more like connected to people. And yeah, that's basically the message behind the project, is just like, you can speak to anyone, even if you may not think you have a connection to them, you can do, and it means a lot to stop and speak to someone, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really incredible. Can you tell us a little bit about how you go about collecting the stories from the people that you share on your platform as well?
Yeah, so basically what I usually do is just go around with a camera. Just basically when I see someone, I just go like, oh, hey, like I run this project, it's completely non-profit. Are you interested in sharing your story? And obviously there are a few responses you get, and some people are very happy and want to tell their story, and there are some people who are more reluctant. And obviously, like, I don't push, because I don't want the platform to be about the stories being there, but more about, if you are someone homeless and you feel like you have something to tell that people aren't listening to you, like, you want your story out there as much as I want to tell the story. I don't want that to be like a one-sided thing. So I always make sure that people understand where the story's going, what it can be used for. And if I'm ever featured in articles or anything, I make sure to say, okay, don't use whatever story you want. Like, I can tell you which stories people were very happy to be shared anywhere, or which stories people said, okay, but don't share it anywhere else, And I make sure there's that level of trust there, because I think that's the problem with being homeless when you're interviewed a lot of the time, is that you have no like backing to defend yourself if that story is used against you. And I think that's what I find with a lot of people, is they get defensive about telling their story because they've spoken to organizations or newspapers which have then like used their story to tell something that they didn't want to tell. So yeah, it's basically just a kind of mutual respect thing of just going up to someone and saying like, hey, I'm doing this, are you interested in telling your story? And you can see from the project, if you look through our Instagram, that a few people hide their faces, and that's purely a case of, I want to tell my story, but I want to hide my identity, because a lot of people are fleeing from domestic violence, or family don't know they're homeless, but they still have a story to tell, and they still want people to hear what they have to say, but they don't want their face attached to that. So yeah, like, I think the platform is just there for anyone who wants to tell something and needs a platform for it to be heard on, basically. Yeah.
Amazing. And it's so funny because actually when we started the be too quick to judge campaign for Leho. Like, I hadn't thought about like who we wanted to contact or how we were going to go about it, but your platform does exactly that. You know, I've been so interested in trying to raise more awareness for the stigmas and stereotypes around homelessness, because I feel like not a lot of charities do that, and it's not done. It's just, you know, there's people focus on the more individual behaviours like sleeping outdoors rather than the structural causes. And actually, homelessness comes from, you know, a number of complex and intersecting kind of structural factors such as job loss, like you said, you know, domestic abuse, people being evicted from their homes, lack of affordable housing, and all of that. So all of the negative perceptions and attitudes that they face in the street every day must be really, really tough. And I feel like your platform kind of gives them that voice and does that really well. So I guess next, Hugo, I know you had some experience with homelessness at one point in your life, so it'd be good to kind of talk us through that, and also just help us challenge the stereotypes and stigmas around it, really.
Yeah, hi, thanks so much for having me on. So yeah, at 18 I'd moved out of home, and I was at 17 I moved out of home, and I was in a relationship, and that relationship broke down, and I decided to leave. It was slightly abusive, it was slightly manipulative from their end to me, so I decided to up and leave. And unfortunately, because I was 18, I wasn't deemed priority need by the council, which meant that I rung them up and said, this is what's happening. And I said, I got picked up by a charity, and they helped me. They eventually did house me after 3 months. But there was one night where I couldn't have anywhere else to stay. And I rung up the council and I said, please, can you give me some advice? I need somewhere to stay. The night stop accommodation, the volunteering program, there was no host to house me. None of my friends could put me up. The charity couldn't help that one particular night. I rang up the council and I said, please, can I have somewhere to stay? And they said, you're single, you're male, you're 18, can fend for yourself, go sleep under a bridge. And I've never forgotten that. And at the time I was really angry. I was like, why can't you help me? Are you going to give me the blankets and the duvets to be able to sleep safely? And then I did sleep in a bank lobby that night, and undercover, with a CCTV camera looking directly at me. But it was the scariest night of my life, and I get a lot of comment about my experience, and oh, you only had one night on the street, you know, you don't know much about homelessness. But that one night was the scariest night of my life, and I was so scared about what could have happened to me. I could have had my stuff robbed, I could have been stabbed, I could have been murdered, I could have been raped, I could have been urinated on, I could have been beaten up, I could have been dragged out onto the street. All manner of things could have happened to me, and all of that was just running around my head. So about challenging the stereotypes, it's really important that we challenge them. And you know, Kate's project's amazing because it talks about the bread and butter issues of you know, how people fell onto the streets, and it you know, I think as society we have this perception that people on the streets are like a different group of people. They've kind of fallen down from earth and just like landed on our streets, and we kind of walk past them and we're like, someone on the street, and we don't necessarily recognize that, you know, they had a home not that long ago, or you know, a few years ago or whatever. But you know, anyone can become homeless. Obviously people with money, it's less likely they'll end up on the streets. But the stigma around homelessness is everyone just seems to think that it's rough sleeping, and rough sleeping, people on the streets, is the most prevalent form of homelessness, but actually the most visible form of homelessness, but the least prevalent. So people who are sofa surfing, in hospitals, in jails, you know, on their friend's spare couch, they are the majority of people who are homeless. And so it's just about getting that message out and saying that, you know, we probably walk past in the street, not during COVID times, but out of COVID times, we probably walk past, you know, 4 or 5 people who are homeless in the street a day, and we don't even realize it because, you know, they're wearing normal clothes. I not these exact, not this t-shirt, but I was wearing normal clothes when I was homeless, and no one would have thought about me. You know, I wasn't that scruffy man with a beard and a dog and a can of, you know, special brew. I wasn't that guy. I was me. But I just so happened to not have a home. And there was a story. So I come from the Carden Banfield Foundation, and Carden Banfield was a 74-year-old man who was found partially mummified in a tent in Worcester in 2016. And he tragically was left alone and was found by a member of the public. And then no one investigated it. And so I went on a 5-year mission to get an 4-year mission to get an investigation. And that happened. And during that, it was about challenging the stereotypes around that as well, which was, you know, an old man wasn't investigated. Whereas had it been a young female teenager who was found in a tent, it would have almost been certain to be investigated. Police would have been there, you know, like all the attention would have been on that. And so there's a stereotype around, you know, just because they're old and a man, you know, should they be treated any less differently or any differently to other people? So, yeah, the Carden Banfield Foundation, and I know the People Project, which we are partnering up with.
Yeah.
Long day. We're going to be challenging those stereotypes along with Leho and their
well, yeah, and it's so interesting. You made a point about, you know, you having that kind of fear, not knowing what was going to happen to you. And actually, when we speak to a lot of people experiencing homelessness on the street, that's their fear every day. And like they always say, it's a constant battle in the streets where shoes get lost. And Kate, I'm sure you know this. I feel like, you know, we've seen this in your stories where a lot of them just, you know, they get into fights on the street. It's just a very dangerous, because it's almost like a battle of like survival. You know, you're fighting for your life every day on the street, and it's pretty tough. So yeah, I guess it's, you know, super scary. And Kate, do you have anything to kind of share on that?
Yeah, and I think what you were saying, Hugo, about, you know, I didn't cover it when I first spoke, but how people become homeless, I think it's so interesting because you never see yourself as someone who is homed. You never see yourself as becoming homeless, but, you know, there's so many reasons people become homeless. You know, it's not, as I first thought at 17, just like, oh, you know, you lost your job or you got addicted to alcohol or drugs. You know, it's not. If anything, if people are on drugs or alcohol when they're homeless, a lot of the time it's a way of surviving as on the streets, like mentally, just because, like we say, it's a constant battle of just, I don't know if I'm going to survive tonight, and never having that safe space to go back to is like so hard. And, you know, escaping that is like escapism, you know. But yeah, different ways of becoming homeless is mental. And I think even now doing the project for 4 years, like I still come across news stories almost every week of just, wow, I've never thought of it like that. Or, you know, like we're talking about domestic violence, you know, if there's been cuts to domestic violence shelters, that affects people on a level where if you need to get out of domestic violence, if you don't have family you can turn to, you become homeless, you know. And understanding that somebody feels safer being on the street than in a situation like that is terrible. And there just isn't the support there, you know, for people that need to go somewhere else. And like you were saying, Hugo, I think there's just councils are unable to help so much of the time just because budget's so spread thin, or, you know, if you're not priority on the list, you know, that's why you don't see a lot of homeless women, because women are usually a priority. But then it's like, what about a young boy like yourself who is barely barely an adult at that point? You know, you're not fit, no one is fit, you know, to be sleeping on the streets, especially that young and that vulnerable. But, you know, they're just, I think people want to help, but there isn't like help there. And I think that's what I think my project tries to say, is that, you know, you may not have money to help. You know, at 17, I didn't have money to be able to help people, but my way of helping was to try and share stories and try and speak to people. And I think a lot of people I speak to now, I try and ask the question of how can people help? And more than anything else, people just say, like, just saying hello, smiling, you know. And now whenever I walk home, if I don't have time to actually speak to someone, it takes no longer for me to just go like, have a good evening as I walk past someone, and I think it's an awkward thing to say because you think someone will be angry that you haven't been able to help them, but just being noticed instead of the awkward avoiding eye contact just is so nice. And I think you will see that. If that's like one thing I would tell people to take away from this, is just say like good evening or good day to someone, like, oh, I'm really sorry, I don't have any money, but like, have a good evening. That's literally what I say. And the guy I see every day at the day after work, he like really appreciates it. I buy him a coffee if I can, but just saying hello and saying goodnight, like I think really just makes someone feel noticed and feel like there are people out there looking out for them. And yeah, I just think it's like everyone can help. It doesn't have to be like you donating money, you donating your time, just noticing people, I think really just helps, make people feel more human. And that can help if you're feeling so isolated from society that you can't, like you said, Hugo, that was one night where you were kind of out asking the council for help and you felt so demoralized by that because they couldn't help you. But imagine someone who's been in that situation for years, who've been like begging for help from charities, governments, and then they kind of give up almost. A lot of the time people do, and then you have people walking past you saying like, oh, get a job, and you feel like you've been trying for so long, but then just having someone walk past and say like, hey, I'm really sorry, mate, like have a good evening, that can just be like, okay, like I am in society, like I'm not like this outsider that people look down on or people avoid, I am a part of society and people do want me to get better. And I think just that step can really help people, because it's so hard when you feel so isolated all the time. And I think that's something that people don't realize is so hard about homelessness. And I think especially at the moment with coronavirus, people are more than ever avoiding other people, and avoiding eye contact, avoiding being close to people, and just, not out as much as they would be. And then homeless people are just kind of left, to their own devices. A lot of charities have been closing as well, just due to volunteers being vulnerable and, isolating themselves as well. And it's just, I think there's just is, we can all do something and it doesn't have to cost us anything. That's what I just add to that, basically.
Yeah. And sorry, when I was on the street, it was a really weird out of body experience. But when I was lying there on the cash point lobby, I lost my humanity, and it was a really strange feeling, and I still can't quite put it into words now. I wrote a blog post about it actually, but it was like not feeling human. I felt I had bones and skin, and that was it. I didn't feel like part of society. I didn't, people would walk in the middle of the night. I think it was a Tuesday or Wednesday, so it wasn't really busy. And people would walk in the middle of the night and I was just lay there kind of in the corner. I'd either completely blank me or someone would go, oh, what are you doing there? No one said hello. No one said, are you okay? And it was just, it did not feel like I was part of the human race or society or anything like that. It was such a weird out of body kind of, it was a really weird feeling. But yeah, Kate's right, actually just validating someone's humanity by saying hello and giving them eye contact. And if you're going to speak to them, one more thing I would say is, if you have time and you can speak to them, is kneel down to their level. And so you don't have a power structure of I'm standing over you, I'm better than you kind of perception. Kneel down to their level, look them in the eye and give them some proper human kind of human contact. Because also, we go into a cafe, we order a coffee, we want the person on the other side of the till to be like, oh, hello, how are you? What would you like? Would you like this? Would you like that? And also given a choice. So yeah, as society, we should do that to people who are homeless as well. We should give them a choice and we should give them the same level of humanity that we expect from other people when we carry out our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And actually, it can get pretty lonely, and I can't even begin to imagine how hard it must be to noticeably see people walk past you with their heads down, avoiding eye contact. As soon as you make the first 2 seconds and then they just look away, then it's just you can see that, so it's just not a very pleasant thing. And I can't imagine how hard it must be. And saying hello would be, even Kate and Thuta, when we went to see when we did our first the winter campaign. I think it was the first guy we ever donated a meal to. He spent about 15 or 20 minutes talking to us about one book he had read, and you could tell that he hadn't spoken to someone in so long, but we were happy to just stand there and let him talk and almost feel like he's being heard, you know. So I think that's so crucial and important, because you can get in a scenario where you speak to them for like hours and just like really long conversations, but it's because they haven't spoken to someone in so long, you know, other than sometimes like people on the streets as well. But it's just, yeah, having that, I guess, human connection, you're right, is just so important. And it's how we all survive, you know. As humans, we need that kind of connection, and we need that, I guess, TLC.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think you know, even, I mean, this is obviously not something to compare, but like even being on lockdown, you know, a lot of us probably were at home, you know, alone, away from families and stuff, and you know, we all went through some sort of, you know, mental health, and like right now self-care is so important, and people are starting to realize that. But obviously imagine, you know, when you're out on the streets and there are people that are passing by around you, but you don't actually have anyone to speak to. So I think that's like quite a powerful way to like help, if you can just spare a few minutes to say hi and just make someone's day, I guess. Like one experience I had was like with this man who had a bandage in his hand, and I basically parked my bike somewhere. I went to the post office, and when I came back out, he was there right beside my bike. And then, to be honest, I tell myself off every time, but at first my first thought was like, oh, is he trying to steal my bike? Like I felt a bit, you know, hesitant, and I just felt that natural worry feeling. And then I actually went to my bike, and he was just standing there. He had like a Tesco bag, and I feel he had a beard as well. I don't want to like stereotype anything, but you know, he had a bandage, and he was just like standing, not really speaking to anyone. And he felt like he looked like he had a really miserable day. And I took my bike, and as I was like unlocking my bike, I felt the need to kind of say something. And I said, hi, like, are you okay? And he just looked up at me, and he wasn't really expecting that at all. And he was really shocked that I said hi to him. And he was like, oh yeah, I'm completely fine. Like, thank you, young lady, or something. And then he kind of smiled and laughed. And then he was like, you're right. And I was like, yeah, thank you. And he said, nice bike to me. And, you know, it was just a very like short conversation, but I felt that, you know, he basically felt acknowledged, and he had a smile on his face by the time I was turning around, and I just said, you know, have a nice day, and I went off. But I just felt like, okay, I was able to put a smile on someone's face. And I hate that, you know, I've even felt a bit worried in the beginning, and I feel like that's kind of that one stereotype that needs to be tackled, when you kind of naturally feel like, you know, you have something to worry about if someone that's dressed a bit like, you know, not nice standing right beside you. And I think it's just important to kind of accept that obviously not everyone's able to dress as nice, and like it doesn't have to mean that it's, you know, something harmful or anything like that. And I think maybe it comes down to kind of young kids as well, as we're raised in society. I wanted to touch upon like Hugo, the Carden Banfield education system that's been in place, you know, with Ryan. He's basically teaching kids at school how to basically perceive homeless individuals, right? And I just thought that was really interesting, because even as kids, like children, I think need to kind of learn as well the fact that, you know, someone experiencing homelessness doesn't have to be this scary like man, like it's just a state of a living situation, you know. And I think, yeah, that's just quite important. Hugo, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it comes from my experience of I during the campaign before the foundation, my little campaign. I remember being invited into a school and to give a talk about homelessness. And the member of staff I was talking with knew about my experience, but I said, "Don't tell anyone else." And she was like, "Why?" And I said, "You'll see why." And so I went into this assembly and I talked about homelessness. And then about 20 minutes later, I said I was homeless, and the whole assembly hall, their jaws just dropped, and they were really shocked because they were like, what really? And it wasn't, I mean, the kids were shocked. And after I was saying about anyone can become homeless, and like like you say, it's a matter of a living situation. It's not premeditated. People aren't born with a kind of like a prescription that they're going to be homeless in life. Sometimes it's a set of circumstances. But I could see on the sidelines, the teachers were like really visibly shaken up by this, thinking, oh no, what? This could be us. And so, yeah, what we're doing at the Cardin Banfield Foundation is we're developing a program of education which goes into schools or charities or kind of anyone who wants it, really, to challenge the stereotypes and just kind of give a bit of education around it. And for example, we could potentially use the stories that Kate puts on the People Project, just to give a bit of context to kind of homelessness as this structural issue, which you said earlier, Joey, about how do we tackle the issue in front of us? And part of the reason why our tagline at the foundation is responding to homelessness, not mentioning ending it, is because it's so structural and there's so many reasons why people become homeless. You can't end it. You can't solve homelessness. You can't stop people becoming homeless. But what you can do is you can respond to their situation to stop them falling into crisis. And so the education message isn't about trying to tell people you can't become homeless. It's, if you become homeless, this is what you should do. And the first thing you should do is you should ring up your local council. And they are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They have to have someone on call. Ring up your local council and give them the situation. And then they will assess it against the legislation and the legal criteria they have to. It's not them being mean. It's because they have very, very meaty pieces of legislation and kind of processes that they have to go through. And that's the same in any council. That isn't pointing anyone out in particular. And so, yeah, the best idea is to go to your council, and all the local authority website numbers are on the Cardin Banfield website, cardinbanfield.org. And then I'm Homeless Now, and every local authority numbers on there, because the first point of contact should be your local authority. And then it's just about kind of educating people. If you fall into this situation, this is what you should do. It doesn't do any harm looking into local hostels, local charities, local food banks in your area. You can go away and do that now. As you watch this video, after you watch this video, you can just do a bit of research, because there's an estimated kind of hundreds of thousands of people who could potentially fall into homelessness after COVID, after the lockdown. So all of these people need somewhere to go. And, if they just do a bit of research about the charities, about the local authority, then they will stop kind of doing what happened to me, which was one day I was housed, and then literally overnight, everything fell from under my feet. And I was just planted in this situation of crisis where I was not prepared for it. And someone the other day asked me, did you know about homelessness before you were homeless yourself, Hugo? And I said, no. It didn't even, I didn't even acknowledge a homeless person on the street. I didn't even imagine what it was like. I knew nothing until suddenly one day, finger click, and I was in it, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
What is this? So the education program is not necessarily saying you can't become homeless. It's, if due to a tragic set of circumstances you do become homeless, this is what you should do. And there are survival stories. You know, I'm a survival story, and I know I had a choice. I had a choice when I was homeless. I had a choice of going down a path of drugs, alcohol, you know, kind of the cycle of homelessness, where I go into a hostel and then I might get involved in some trouble and then be kicked out and go to somewhere else and then get kicked out and, you know, kind of be stuck in that. Or I had a choice of going, you know what, okay, I'm going to get myself out of this, and I'm going to use all the help and support that I'm given, and I'm going to, you know, move forward with my life. And the easiest thing would have been to go down that route of, you know, drugs, alcohol. I was offered it countless times, or suicide. You know, I thought about suicide more than I thought about living in the 3 months that I was homeless and walking the streets. I thought about killing myself a lot more than I did about living. And it would have been the easier option, purely because it would have just numbed the pain. I wouldn't be feeling this anymore. So I can see why people go down it, but I'm here saying that, you know, there's a better option. You know, I went to university, I ran in a general election. I now run a charity to respond to homelessness. So, you know, there is a silver lining to someone's situation, and that's what the baseline of the education program is about. Is, you know, just because you're homeless, it doesn't mean that's like a death sentence. It shouldn't be, and it isn't.
Yeah, and that's so true. It's like homelessness is always like a temporary state of kind of living. You know, a lot of people do end up getting out of it, or they kind of get the support, even though sometimes it takes years and years. I guess it just depends. But yeah, it is super tough. And I think, yeah, you made a good point there. I was actually going to ask about, you know, the future of homelessness, but it does come from different, it doesn't, you know, we're not going to end homelessness tomorrow. It comes from education, future generations. It comes from educating people now, breaking that stigma, challenging it. It's just, you know, those are different areas. Cool. Well, I guess we'll end it from here. I think maybe we'll hear 1 or 2 sentences from each of you, just talking one about what we can do. I know you guys mentioned either saying hello, but just a bit more about how we can help both of your respective organizations, but also just one kind of piece of advice for people who are looking to basically help, or who want to make a better difference, or yeah. Go on, Kate.
I'll start. So just quickly, replying to what Hugo was saying, I think that's the thing that people don't realize is homelessness isn't like this group of like, oh yeah, homeless people, you know, homeless people can be anyone. Not all homeless people are friends or have the same opinions or have become homeless for the same reasons. And I think what's really interesting about what Hugo said was, before he became homeless, you know, he hadn't thought about homelessness in that way. And I think a lot of people I speak to say that as well, as like, oh yeah, I was the person that would like look down on homeless people. Why don't you do something? And now I'm homeless, you know. And I don't think, like, there's this idea, I think, that like homeless is there, we're here, but it's like we, you know, the two switch over, you know, and homelessness isn't like a conglomerate group of people, you know, it's a situation you're in, you know, you can't be homeless, you are homeless, you know. And I think it's really interesting to just remember that, you know, I think one of the most impactful things I was ever told through the People Project is the stupidest thing I've ever been told. But when I was speaking to someone, he at the time had been homeless for about 6 months. I remember he just said as a passing comment, like, yeah, you know, 6 months ago, I was sitting in my 3-bedroom house watching The Walking Dead. And I thought, fuck, like, sorry to swear, but 6 months ago, I was sitting in my house watching The Walking Dead, and his path has taken him here, my path's taken me here, you know. And what was the difference between us? You know, I'm young, I could be a student if I actually had gone to university. You know, there are so many situations that could have put me in a vulnerable situation like that. And if I didn't have family to turn to, that's what happens. And, you know, if you don't have family who are able to support you, that's what happens. And I think, you know, remembering that homeless people aren't like people who've always been on the poverty line or always been on the edge. It can be people who had families, big houses, mortgages, you know, and just something happens. And I think my final point to just end this would be just understanding that homeless people aren't like a breed of people. You know, it's anyone can be homeless. And I think people say that and people never really take it in. But honestly, anybody can be homeless, and anybody is homeless, you know. And I think, just again, to reiterate, just stopping and speaking to someone, saying hello, just smiling, honestly does more than you think. And I think, like you were saying, Thuta, like, is that stigma at first, or you have that worry at first, and I don't think we need to feel guilty about that, because that's just what we've been told. But the way to break that is, like you said, just saying hello and realizing, like, okay, this man maybe looked angry, looked upset, but me saying hello put a smile on his face. And now I know that, you know, I've improved someone's day and it didn't cost you anything. So that's what I would, you know, say for people to take away, is just kind of look around you and see what you can just do to help people.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'd add on to that. StreetLink is a great service. So please go on to StreetLink, type it in Google. So if you see someone on the streets, what StreetLink does is connect services with that rough sleeper. So go onto the website or download the app, I think, and then you feed in information about that person, and then that gets passed on to the services. It's really important to note that StreetLink isn't actually reporting a person for being homeless. It's not a negative thing. People think, oh no, crap, I'm reporting a homeless person. You're not. You're actually trying to direct services to them, and so they get help. So StreetLink is really important. Also, you know, as I was saying, how we can help is, it doesn't do any harm. If someone says to you, okay, I'm worried about domestic violence or my tenancy, or I'm behind on my rent or something, direct them to the people who can help. So citizens advice, their local council, debt charities, housing associations, etc. If you need the local authority number, go on to cardandbanfield.org and it's on there. And I think, just to echo what everyone else has said, just saying hello, bending down to their level, and just giving them that bit of humanity that we all deserve, we all need, and we can all have. It's nothing. Doesn't cost you anything to say hi. Doesn't cost you anything to kneel down to someone, and it validates them as human. And that's how we can respond to homelessness.
Nice. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
This was super insightful. Thank you so much, guys.